If you've never walked into a room that smells like wet socks, scorched dreams, and questionable stew, buckle up. You're about to enter the loudest, stickiest, and most gloriously chaotic corner of history, where your nose goes to die and your curiosity comes alive. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into the grimy, gutsy soul of old-world nightlife, the medieval pub. Smash that follow or subscribe button before your mug runs dry, and drop a comment letting me know what planet, time zone, or tavern floor you're watching from. Let's crank down the lights, maybe light a candle for mood, and to ward off spectral barmaids, and step into the muddied streets of yesteryear's nightlife. Imagine this. You're plodding down a rain-slick alleyway that smells like burned straw, soggy goat, and disappointment stew. It's either just rained, or it's about to, it doesn't matter. Everything's slick, your boots are leaking, and a wheelbarrow nearly turned you into mashed potatoes. Twice. You're drenched, hungry, and developing a personality disorder from sheer discomfort. What you need now is a drink, and not the holy water kind. But how do you find a watering hole in a town without neon signs or even basic hygiene? You use your ears. Past the clank of the blacksmith and the melodic screeches of someone trying to peddle smoked otter as fine fish, you'll hear it a bubbling cauldron of laughter, arguing, and off-key yodeling about a mythical bird. Follow the ruckus, and there it is. A sagging timber hut, bent sideways like it gave up trying to stand straight. Above the door hangs a rotted plank, painted with what might be a barrel, or a bear, or perhaps a drunken bear holding a barrel. Either way, welcome to the Crooked Mug. You step on something wet. You don't ask what. The door groans like it's auditioning for a horror play, and you're instantly hit in the face by a wave of warm air laced with the scents of damp wool, spilled grog, and roasted who knows what. Congratulations, you've arrived. The roof's low enough to make tall folks crouch and drunk ones kiss the ceiling with their heads. The floor? Dirt? Literal. Trampled. Fermented dirt, with a sprinkle of straw thrown over it like a half-hearted apology. There are no velvet booths or smiling hosts, just noise, heat, and the kind of energy that says, someone's definitely getting punched later. You eye an empty spot on a warped bench near the fire. It's suspiciously damp. Nearby, two old men are bickering over a pig that may or may not exist, and one guy is asleep with a soup ladle still in his hand. Under the table, a scruffy, one-eyed mutt gnaws a bone with the entitlement of a paying guest. This, my friend, is just the foyer. The main chaos awaits. The heavy wooden door thunders shut behind you, and the room swallows you like a warm, damp coat that smells like 7 decades of bad decisions. Your eyes adjust to flickering candlelight dancing across soot-stained walls, casting shadows that make even the stools look ready to fight. The hearth crackles in the corner, providing both light and a smoke hazard. Lazy ribbons of smoke swirl overhead, half-heartedly drifting toward a chimney probably blocked by something tragic and feathered. But it's not the noise or the warmth that socks you in the sense it's the aroma. Smell doesn't do it justice. It's a full-contact olfactory assault. The top layer is fermented ale lukewarm, pungent, and splashed everywhere like medieval Febreze. Beneath that, layers of sweat, human, coarse, and something you hope was once mythical. Add in a bouquet of moldy bread, wet straw, and a pinch of boiled onion, and you've got yourself a cologne no sane soul would bottle. The tables are scarred by time, knives, and what looks suspiciously like teeth marks. They tilt defiantly, refusing to admit defeat. Benches creak under the weight of cloaks, mud-caked boots, and consequences. The straw on the floor tries bless its heart to soak up the overflow of drink, spit, and the occasional unconscious patron. You move like a wary cat. One misstep and your boot might encounter something with the texture of guilt. Around you, the pub hums with chaotic life. Laughter bursts like fireworks from one corner, while in another, two merchants threaten each other with root vegetables. A woman pounds her tankard on the table, hard enough to spill half of it. Nobody flinches. A dazed man nearby stares at you like he's either having an epiphany or trying to remember where his arms are. Someone sneezes. An entire side of the room leans away as one. And yet, for all the filth, funk and yelling it feels right. This place breathes. It stinks, sure, but it lives. It's the medieval version of a neighborhood cafe, if your cafe had axe wounds in the tables and smelled like a battlefield. You finally settle on a bench that groans under you like it holds a grudge. It's sticky. It's possibly cursed. But for now, it's home. At a glance, the furniture layout looks like a drunken giant tried to redecorate mid-seizure and then passed out. No blueprint, no bar counter, no logical flow. Just tables, barrels, crates, and chaos tossed together like stew ingredients. Everything's either way too close or impossibly far, depending on your level of intoxication. The hearth anchors the madness, its fire roaring like an angry chef with something to prove. People crowd around, soaking up the heat like moths with mugs. Those in prime spots guard them like dragons. Those without? That's what ale's for. The bar, if you dare use the term, is usually a plank across barrels, sagging with the combined weight of mugs, elbows, and debt. Behind it, the monarch of mayhem, the tavern keeper. Now, the tavern keeper doesn't wear a crown, but make no mistake, they rule this world. One part cook, one part bouncer, all parts terrifying. If it's a man, he's shaped like a smoked ham with sideburns and the patience of a tired bear. If it's a woman, she can silence a riot with one eyebrow. Either way, they've seen everything, forgotten worse, and can clean blood from hay like it's a Sunday chore. Regulars get a grunt, strangers get a scowl, troublemakers get a tankard to the face. The tavern keeper knows who paid, who lied, and who's due for a karmic roundhouse. They don't write anything down. They don't have to. Their brain is a ledger of doom. If they're smiling, the place sings. If they're not, drink fast and pray silently. Need gossip? Bribe them. Need safety? Sit close. Need a favor? Better not be the guy who broke a mug last week. They might have a helper kid, a cousin, an orphan who looks like he regrets being born. These assistants carry barrels, dodge flying stew, and exist solely to suffer. So while this place may seem like pandemonium dipped in gravy, it's a delicately balanced storm. And at the heart of it stands one apron-wearing warlord, keeping the whole mess from exploding into a fireball of fermented rage. Welcome, traveler. You've found the tavern. Now take a seat, just not that one. It moves on its own. Ah, yes, the drinks. Let's talk about the liquid lottery known as the medieval pub pour. Somewhere between the half-fermented mead and what might just be rainwater filtered through a goat, you'll find a drink called bee-burn, a mead rumored to have honey, fermented fruit, and a bit of actual bee venom. Reserved mostly for nobles, wedding parties, and that one minstrel who won't perform unless his tip jingles louder than his trousers. It's both sweet and lethal, perfect match for their personalities. Then there's scrump cider, brewed from apples that either dropped an hour ago or were stepped on by a mule 3 weeks back. Sharp, acidic, and served in mugs that look suspiciously like last night's stew bowls, it's favored in orchard-rich areas or by folks desperate to forget the smell of the man who just sat next to them. Wine? Technically, yes. But unless you're in the southern hills or someone important just rode into town, what you'll get is watered down, turned sour, and served with a healthy side of disdain. The good stuff is hoarded by dukes, bishops, and that shady trader who just made off with half a wagon of sea salt. And water? Oh, bold of you to ask. Most of it is a swirling mystery of invisible danger. Boiling's too expensive, clean wells are rare, and half the time, you're gambling with your intestines. That's why even kids are handed a late's not about fun, it's about survival. There are no fancy pours or mixologists here. Your drink comes in wood, clay, or dented tin. Some mugs still carry memories of last night's dinner. You raise yours, give it the sniff test, and take a sip. It's bitter, it's body temperature, and it's oddly satisfying. Because in the world of medieval taverns, if it's wet and doesn't kill you on sight, it's 5-star quality. Now, the drink's done. Your belly grumbles louder than the bard's singing, and you remember you haven't eaten since sunrise, and your last bite was a crust of sadness with a side of barley. Time to eat. But calm your expectations. There's no menu, no waiter, and absolutely no one asking if you're gluten-free. You don't order in a medieval pub. You shout through the chaos, and someone yells back what's left. Enter the slawpot special, known more kindly as potagia, thick, questionable stew made from anything lying around that didn't crawl away fast enough. It's been bubbling in the same iron pot since Monday. It's now Thursday. Ingredients are tossed in daily. Nothing is ever removed. It's less a meal and more a soup-flavored history book. Meat? Maybe. Probably rabbit. Possibly pigeon. Might even be that scruffy chicken that got a little too curious. If it's game, it's either delightfully seasoned or disturbingly chewy. Your bowl is hand-shaped clay or roughly carved wood. Your spoon? Bring your own. Most folks do. Or just use fingers. Napkins? Your sleeve. Or, if you're lucky, the community rag hanging from a nail touched by legends, stains, and trauma. Bread appears too. Hard, dark, and heavy enough to wound. If it's soft, it was baked today. If not, it doubles as a weapon. It's usually served with a chunk of cheese that smells like it developed emotions. There might be pickled eggs, or salted fish, or a house special, which is tavern speak, for we found too much of this behind the barrels. Still, as the firelight dances and noise swirls, the heat of a steaming bowl in your hands feels decent. If you don't focus too hard on what's floating in it, you might even call it comforting. You're not here for fine cuisine, you're here to refuel like a survivor. By now you've secured your benchadili one without an embedded knife hand. You begin to take in the real feast, the people. A medieval pub is the original reality show, where oversharing is sport and everyone's the star. To your left, an ale-soaked farmer named Grubbin slaps your back mid-story. He's on his fourth drink and mid-tale, about a cow that gave birth sideways on a hill. You're now part of his emotional support group. In the shadows, a hooded figure sips something dark, slow. Is he a rogue monk? A debt-dodging outlaw? Or just really socially awkward? You're not about to find out. Near the hearth, a soldier armor dented, eyeglasses pins, tales involving dragons, Frenchmen, and a talking shovel. None of it's true, and no one minds. His mug's full. His fans are roaring. A merchant, sweat glistening, brags about barley prices and jingles gold coins like a man praying for thieves. Dice clatter across a warped table. Two locals, Swen and Digby, are locked in an intense game. Swen cheats. Digby knows. But he's saving the fight for a better time, like when the ale runs out. In the corner, a bard strums a slightly tuned lute, singing about love, laundry, and lords who wore their breeches backwards. Last night's bard sang half naked and hit only 2 chords, so this is an upgrade. Women drift through the crowd, some working, some watching, all sharp-eyed and sharper-witted. They'll flirt or fight depending on your face. Kids scurry through the chaos, snatching bread and slipping coins. No one stops them. It's all part of the rhythm. Around you, everyone's watching, drinking, pretending not to notice the unconscious man under table 3. This isn't just a meal, it's a live show. The background score? It's not a lute, it's life. The music of the tavern begins with a chorus of mugs thudding on woodsome and cheer, some by accident. Every crash is met with laughter or a roar of approval. Then, the laughter rolls in deep, hearty, and wildly unhinged. A shepherd laughs at hay puns. A knight snorts at the word gravy. A priest loses it every time someone mentions ducks. Don't ask. Voices rise like a storm, stories, arguments, nonsense, bets. The barmaid yells across the room at a man who got handsy. Someone else shouts, "Next round," like it's a battle cry. And in the background, the bard weaves his questionable lyrics through the dinno, singing about someone in the room. Things just got interesting. Something spills. Something burps. Someone falls and continues their story from the floor like nothing happened. A dog barks. A goat bleats. Why is there a goat? Chairs screech like wooden banshees. Nothing is peaceful, yet everything somehow fits. Thensilence. A sudden, magical pause. 3 seconds. Then, a heroic fart breaks the spell, and the tavern explodes with laughter once again. This is no background noise, it's the heartbeat. Raw, real, roaring. And the longer you stay, the more it starts to make sense. The drink flows, the stew settles, and the tavern evolves. It's no longer just a grubby gathering, it becomes a medieval casino of chaos. Gambling kicks off. No velvet ropes, no rules. Just a cracked table, some rusty coins, and egos about to be shattered. Dice games rule the floor carved from bone, wood, or mystery materials. Every roll sparks cheers, groans, or cries of sorcery. No one trusts the dice. Everyone still plays. Cards two-hand painted, smudged, and usually missing 3. The rules? Fluid. Sometimes you count numbers. Sometimes you match birds. Sometimes you make them up. Wagers are wild. Goats, cloaks, freedom for the night. Someone once bet his shadow. He lost. Regulars like Peg, Leg Tom, and One-Eyed Willa shuffle cards like they were born in a casino. Cheating is half the game. A switch of dice, a rigged shuffle, a mysterious coffle part of the fun. Side bets pop up, arm wrestling, thumb duels, and the noble art of drink till you drop. Win, and the room applauds. Lose, and you nap under a table until market day. And still, somehow, no one wants to leave. The stakes are insane. The energy? Addictive. Because in a medieval tavern, luck isn't just a thrill, it's a full-body gamble with your dignity, your coin pouch, and occasionally, your trousers. As the moon climbs and the air grows thicker with sweat and anticipation, a new act takes the floor, not with swords or dice, but with voices, rhythm, and pure, unfiltered nonsense. Welcome to the Verbal Coliseum, Tavern Tales, Night Edition. Over in the dim-lit corner, a bard named Flindle missing, 2 front teeth, but oozing theatrical confidence gently, strums a wheezing lute that sounds like it's sighing in protest. With a dramatic hair toss, he doesn't have hair. He belts a song about a brave knight who fell in love with a sea witch and tragically drowned mid-sonnet. Nobody believes it. Everyone listens. Because here, truth is merely a polite suggestion. Entertainment is sacred. Around the room, ale-inspired storytellers leap into the fray. One beefy fellow swears on his second-best tunic that he once wrestled a bear and won by biting its ear. Another insists he watched a witch turn a cow into a confused goat. A third proudly declares he's a direct descendant of Emperor Ralvin the Flatulentin, his aunt's side. Each tale kicks off with, "You'll never believe this, but..." And we don't. And that's exactly why we lean in closer. Embarrassments become epics. Accidents morph into allegories. Someone tells a joke so awful it loops back around to being hilarious. Another performs a heartfelt poem, definitely stolen from a monastery's bulletin board. The crowd reacts how only a medieval crowd can. Applause, laughter, or airborne bread depending on performance quality. Sometimes, a real performer passes throat-raveling minstrels or scandalous scolds who trade rhythm for rest and song for supper. Their tales are smoother, their tunes practiced, and they can rile a crowd like a firebrand dipped in charm. But even they obey the ancient rule of tavern tales. Never let the truth ruin a perfectly good lie. In the flickering firelight, amid swirling smoke and swaying mugs, these stories aren't just noise, they're legacy. This is how strangers become allies, enemies, or partners in future crimes. By midnight, half the room's reenacting the saga of the one-legged knight who defeated 6 bandits with a soup ladle and a smile. It's ridiculous, it's impossible, and it's pure gold. But as the night deepens and the mead marinates the mind, the air changes thicker now, warmer, and suddenly, everything smells just a bit more romantic. That's right. It's time for medieval flirting, the most subtle of all contact sports. It begins with blurry eye contact, or an ale-squinted wink across a candlelit table. A man with 2 remaining teeth slurs, "My lady, your eyes outshine the hearth," only to receive a flying crust to the forehead. The crowd erupts. Others try softer moves, offering mug refills, complimenting someone's ankles, or helping carry a bowl of stew, which, naturally, spills. If you're a woman in the room, be it barkeep, merchant, or traveler, you've already deflected 3 wannabe poets, 2 guys who think belching is romantic, and one fool balancing a knife on his nose to impress you. Occasionally, it works. Usually, it doesn't. Sometimes it ends with a grin, sometimes with a black eye. But lover, something resembling it still finds cracks to crawl through. Courtesans drift among the patrons, graceful and sharp-eyed, sizing up charm, coin, and consciousness levels. Deals are made quietly. Implications, however, are thunderous. And nothing kicks off a tavern brawl faster than a wandering hand, a shared smirk, or a man laughing a little too hard at the bard's joke about bishops. It escalates. A bench is claimed by two men, and neither yields. Someone's mead is knocked over. A muttered insult about someone's mother, or their goat, flies. And just like that, boom. It's on. The tavern explodes. A stool whizzes past your head. A mug crashes. A cloaked woman yells, "Hold my cider!" and launches herself over the table like a drunken hawk. No one blinks. Fights here aren't interruptions, they're main events. And they're usually more comedic than catastrophic. Wild swings, missed punches, accidental tackles into soup. Hair is pulled. Tunics are torn. Someone uses a fish as a weapon. The barkeepless then wields a ladle in one hand and a bat in the other, shouting like a battlefield sergeant. Sometimes, someone jumps in for no reason at all, just caught the vibe. Others make side bets, cheer, or scoot their drinks to safety. Actual weapons? Rare. Drawing steel in a tavern turns things from rowdy to deadly, and nobody wants to get exiled from the only place in town with edible food and indoor warmth. Eventually, someone hits the floor and stays there. Another stumbles into a wall and calls it a bed. The madness fizzles out like a soggy torch abruptly and without ceremony. And here's the wildest part. Once it ends, it really ends. Mugs are lifted again. A new song starts. And the guy who just got elbowed in the face is now sharing bread with his former foe. No lawsuits. No grudges. Just bruises, stories, and maybe a fresh nickname like One-Eyed Harv or Bench Smasher Ron. Because in this world, a proper brawl is just another genre of entertainment. By now, the bard's passed out mid-ballad. Your belly is sloshing with suspicious stew and cider, and your body is pleading for sleep. But don't expect silk sheets and lavender pillows. This is not a resort. This is the Crooked Mug. If the inn offers rooms, they're upstairs reachable by a creaky staircase that tests your balance and your will to live. The floors lean, the beams are skull level, and the beds? Straw piles wrapped in cloth that haven't been cleaned since the last plague. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with strangers. Some snore like dying bagpipes. Others speak in tongues. Privacy is a myth. Your mattress is straw, your blanket is shared, and your dreams smell faintly of garlic and failure. You sleep fully clothed, boots on, dagger under pillow not for comfort, but for strategy. And if you're too broke or too soused to climb stairs, you curl up downstairs on a bench, under a table, or beside a dog that no one remembers owning. The tavern never truly sleeps. There's always the crack of settling timber, the hiss of dying fire, or the gentle, haunting sound of someone snoring through their nose and mouth. But somehow, you drift off. It's not luxurious. It's not even hygienic. But it's safe enough. The fire holds off the worst of the cold. The tavern keeper patrols the shadows like a guard dog in an apron. And the sounds, the soft murmur of dreams, the occasional groan, the atmospheric flatulence become a lullaby. Raw, human, weirdly comforting. You wake with a stiff neck, dry mouth, and a bruise you don't remember earning. But for a few bizarre hours, you've slept in the company of rogues, wanderers, farmers, and fools. No kings. No rules. Just snores and straw and the eternal hope that your boots are still nearby. Then, dawn. It creeps in like guilt-pale light slipping through the shutters, poking your eyes open with passive aggression. The tavern has changed. Not quiet, but tired, defeated, hungover. You open one eye. Someone's boot is on your chest. Someone else mumbles about sheep taxes. Flindle the bard is under a table, cradling his lute like a betrayed lover. A chicken hops across the room, pecking yesterday's breadcrumbs like it owns the place. No one questions where it came from. The fire has dimmed, the room cold and filled with the ghosts of last night's laughter. A few souls begin to stir, groaning like wounded knights after a battle fought inside their skulls. One man sits up, looks around, lies back down. Mood. And behind the bar, already rattling mugs and muttering in fluent rage, stands the only person in the building with functional brain cells. The tavern keeper, of course. The tavern keeper's day begins like a warlord surveying a battlefield. With a broom made of sticks and determination, they sweep the night straw into haphazard piles. Something suspiciously thick simmers in a blackened pot behind them, melodramatic, threatening, and definitely alive. A quick glance across the room full of half-conscious bodies earns a dramatic clang of ladle against tin mug. It's not a bell, it's a declaration of war on sleep. Up or out. There's no morning feast, no omelets, no honey cakes. If fortune smiles, there's leftover sludge now, somehow thicker than last night. Bread's been toasted against the hearth, ale's been stretched thin with water, and everyone's too hungover to care. A few determined souls dunk their faces in the rain barrel out front and call it a bath. You check your pouch 2 coins and a button. Better than nothing. Your boots? Still beneath your bench. One now sports bite marks. Doesn't matter. Still a win. New life seeps into the tavern like sunlight through smoke. Early risers drift in grumbling farmers, traveling tanners, townfolk seeking courage before facing their livestock, taxes, or in-laws. The room stirs like a waking beast. Someone starts recounting the chaos from the night before, louder, bloodier, and now featuring a ghost that arrived during the bard's second chorus. Everyone nods solemnly. It's canon now. The air's thick, the floor's sticky, and the regret hangs as heavy as the smoke. And yet you smile, because you made it through. You've felt the heat of the hearth, the splash of ale on your boots, the sting of spilled stew, the roar of laughter, and the occasional airborne furniture. You've been flirted with, lied to, and possibly cursed. And in that glorious mess, one truth rises above the stench. The Medieval Tavern wasn't just where people drank. It was where people existed. In a world without BuzzFeeds, broadcasts, or anything that begins with breaking news, this was where information flowed. A trader from the coast might bring tales from distant lands. A soldier could describe the smell of a battlefield. A bard's song might stitch a town together despite changing the lyrics nightly. It wasn't just about the drink. It was about connection. Farmers clinked mugs with blacksmiths. Pilgrims passed bread to thieves. Strangers became allies, drinking buddies, or very temporary enemies. Status faded under candlelight. Here, gossip took root, schemes were born, and grudges either simmered or exploded mid-toast. Deals were made on splintered tables, contracts sealed with cider-stained handshakes. This wasn't just a tavern, it was a courtroom, a confessional, a stage. In one evening, you could get hired, get hitched, get robbed, and start a lifelong vendetta, all in time for closing. But there was something more, something priceless, something not sold in the market square or whispered in a chapel. Relief. From cold, from toil, from the bone-deep seriousness of just staying alive. Here, beside the fire, with a bad joke and worse singing, you could forget, just for a little while. Even if the ale was lukewarm, the bread tasted like bark, and the stew might have contained regrets and rodent-shoe. Felt something rare. You felt alive among the living. And in a world where a cold wind, a stray cough, or a passing army could end you, that meant everything. So when you walked into that crooked old tavern, you weren't just buying a drink. You were buying a sliver of belonging, a few lines in a shared story. Maybe even a floor spot by the hearth if no one beat you to it. Because long before lattes, lounges, and curated playlists, there was this, the tavern, filthy, loud, honest, and completely unforgettable. As Pharaoh Akhenaten's strength began to wane, whether from illness, inherited ailments, or the sheer weight of defying 1,000 years of gods, Nephariah stepped further into power. But just as her role expanded, the historical trail begins to dim. In the last chapters of Akhenaten's reign, she begins to slip from view. No grand farewell, No ceremonial farewell carved into stone. No burial recorded. Nothing. Did she die suddenly? Was she cast aside? Or did she ascend to something far beyond queen, a figure so bold that history itself tried and failed to erase her? One day, she was everywhere, chiseled into temple walls, praised in prayers, standing beside a king who dared to remake heaven and earth, and then gone, like a gust of desert wind swallowed by the dunes. Never before had a queen been this public, this powerful. Yet around the 12th year of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, a strange silence falls. Her name disappears from stone. Her image fades from frescoes. No tomb, no inscription, no mourning ritual. Nothing but a void where Egypt's most visible woman should have been. So what happened? One theory leans toward tragedy. Death, quiet and cruel. Even royal blood couldn't shield one from the dangers of childbirth. Her daughter, Mekeret, also vanishes from the record around this time. A mother and daughter lost together? Possibly. But why no tribute? Why no temple or statue or song? For a woman who is treated like divine light, a silent death just doesn't fit the story. Other scholars whisper of something darker. Politics. Maybe Nepheriah fell from favor. The palace had grown tense, isolated. Perhaps Akhenaten turned toward another queener, toward the court itself. Some suggest a new name that flickers briefly in the archives, Semenkhara, a mysterious co-ruler who seems to step in just as Nepheriah vanishes. Was this a half-brother? A secret son? Or was it Nepheriah herself? That's the most electrifying theory of all that. She never disappeared. She simply transformed. There is evidence of a ruler named Neferuaten taking command in the last years of Akhenaten's reign. The inscriptions are feminine in tone. They speak of a beloved husband. They carry the scent of Nepheriah. Could it be that she claimed the double crown not as queen, but as pharaoh? If so, she would have joined an elite, near-sacred lineage. Female kings like Hatshepsut, who wore the cobra-crowned crown and ruled without apology. But this theory, too, crumbles in the sands. Neferuaten's rule ends abruptly. Then comes a name the world would never forget, Tutankhamun. The boy king, the child who would undo it all. He reversed his parents' revolution. He restored the temples, the gods, the old names. If Nepheriah ruled alone, her time was brief. If she became Semenkhara, or Neferuaten, she ruled like a Phantomenly, half-glimpsed in broken sculptures and unspoken lines. And just like that, the most powerful woman in Egypt vanished. But her legend, that was just beginning to breathe. As the city of Achamun was swallowed by dust, a small boy ascended, barely old enough to hold a staff. He wore a name, Tutankhaten. Later changed to Tutankhamun, he would become the most recognized pharaoh in the world, not for how he ruled, but for what he left behind. And so the question stirs, who was his mother? The records, maddeningly, are mute. We know his father was likely Akhenaten, but the mother? Mystery. Some scholars say Nepheriah was his stepmother. Others see her face in old family portraits, the timeline placing her as present when Tutankhamun was still a child. Could she have been his true mother? If she was, it would explain everything. Tutankhamun's early rule was too carefully managed for a boy alone. The return to old gods, the restoration of temples, the tight control of ceremony, it bore the touch of an expert. Someone experienced in politics, religion, and royal perception. Someone like Nepheriah. Was she the hand behind the throne? Or did her father, the high priest Ai, steer the ship from the shadows? Maybe both. Maybe they united to erase the chaos of the sun cult and restore the old ways with a child king as their symbol. One clue glimmers in Tutankhamun's tomb, a golden shrine, showing a woman anointing the young pharaoh. Her features are eerily familiar. Strong, elegant, refined. Nepheriah's likeness? Perhaps. If that's her, then she never left. She simply stepped behind the curtain, guiding Egypt from the shadows. A silent sovereign, a strategist cloaked in memory. Yet we have no tomb for her, no confirmed body, no sacred text etched with her final breath. If she guided Egypt's return to order, Her name was washed away from the stone, wiped from king lists, as if someone feared what remembering her might awaken. But fate is twisted, because in resurrecting Tutankhamun's name, the world stumbled upon hers. She had stood at the heart of Egypt's greatest upheaval, a priestess, a queen, a possible pharaoh, and yet no tomb bears her death rites, no mask, no monument carved with her final plea to the gods. Nothing but shadows. How could a kingdom obsessed with eternity lose a woman like that? Egyptologists have debated for generations. One idea suggests he was buried hastily in the panic of a regime collapse. Another claims her tomb was destroyed during the cleansing of Akhenaten's memory. She became a casualty of religious revenger name chiseled away in righteous fury. But there's one theory that refuses to die. That she isn't lost at all. That her tomb is still there, hidden behind the walls of Tutankhamun's own burial chamber. In 2015, scans of KV-62 revealed anomalous chambers sealed, possibly undiscovered. Could she be resting there, inches away, behind untouched gold and forgotten stone? The world held its breath, but more scans were inconclusive. Funding ran out, digs paused, and once again, she slipped into myth. But her absence is louder than ever. We have her likeness carved, painted, and preserved across time. Her bust, now in Berlin, gazes across museum glass with that infamous serenity, as if holding a secret the rest of the world missed. And every year, new excavations stir, new whispers arise. Could a sealed passage finally give up her name? Could a forgotten chamber spell out her truth? Or will she remain Egypt's eternal riddle? If someone tried to erase her, they failed, because the search for Neferaya never ended. It only deepened. She made decisions that shaped dynasties. She held influence that shifted empires. And now, a single silent sculpture, fragile yet powerful, speaks louder than any written scroll. We may never uncover her tomb. We may never learn how she left this world. But through that iconic bust, Neferaya achieved the ultimate ancient dream. Not gold, not conquest, but immortality through memory. Her face doesn't move, yet it continues to speak. Across centuries, across cultures, it whispers the story of a queen who defied silence. Neferaya's tale lives in that liminal space between what is known and what is dreamed, between the chiseled records and the echoing absences. Few figures from the ancient world have summoned such fierce curiosity and yet remained cloaked in mystery. She's become a paradox, one of the most artistically documented women of her time, yet still shrouded in questions. Over time, the world has imagined her in countless forms. A living goddess walking sunlight made flesh, a brilliant strategist pulling strings behind a heretic king, a tragic romantic wallowed by political storm, or a queen wielding charm like a blade, navigating a collapsing world with grace and cunning. What we do know is this: she was no passive partner. Neferaya's presence rivals that of any king. Her imagery in temples, battle scenes, and sacred ceremonies reveals a woman not simply near power, but wielding it. In an empire ruled by men, she claimed space not through rebellion, but through command. We know she helped anchor one of the boldest theological shifts in human history. Akhenaten may have envisioned the sun god cult, but it was Neferaya who became its human embodiment. She was the face the people looked to, the glowing bridge between the celestial Aten and the earthly kingdom. She didn't just serve the gods. She was divine in form, in presence, in power, and then we know she was nearly erased. When Akhenaten's sun cult fell, the backlash was swift. Temples were reclaimed, old gods restored, and Neferaya's image defaced. Her name scrubbed. Her story buried in the rubble of reform. But here we are, 3,000 years later, and still her name is spoken. Her face is searched. Her story still unfinished commands attention. Why? Because myth endures where memory fails. Because icons become immortal where facts decay. And because when a woman transcends her own time, she can never be fully erased. When a historical figure slips into legend, she becomes untouchable. And perhaps Neferaya wanted it this way. to be remembered not as a footnote, but as a puzzle. Not as a woman explained, but as a mystery revered. Not simply the Queen of Egypt, but the Queen of Enigma. More than 3 millennia have passed since she last walked beneath the scorching Egyptian sun. Yet her silhouette still haunts museums, history books, and minds. Her presence lingers in marble halls and dusty libraries, in scholarly whispers and cinematic dreams. Unlike many ancient rulers, Nefertari hasn't faded. In truth, her influence grows sharper with time. She isn't just remembered, she's relentlessly imagined. And not just for her beauty. We've seen beauty before. It's her absence that draws us in. Her mystery feels intentional, like an invitation, as if she's watching from behind those sculpted eyes, daring us to try and understand. Every generation reshapes her in its own image. In the early 1900s, she was an exotic, ornament graceful, and mute. Later, she became a feminist icona woman, erased by history, reclaimed by scholarship. Today, she's seen as a visionary, a ruler, even a rebel. She's become more than historical. She's become archetypal, an eternal mirror reflecting our hopes, our fears, our need for greatness embodied. Her image, her legend, has lived 1,000 lives, not through confirmed fact, but through fascination. And in ancient Egypt, that was the afterlife. Immortality wasn't just about being mummified. It was about being remembered. If your name was spoken, if your image survived, if your story was retold, you lived on. You walked among the gods. You weren't truly gone. By that standard, Nefertari has transcended. Her name is whispered across continents. Her face is recognized in every corner of the world. And though her biography remains broken, her impact is whole. She may have left no tomb carved in glory, no golden coffin buried in legend, but she left something greater in enduring question. A story that resists ending. A presence that cannot be confined to dates and timelines. Perhaps this was her final, brilliant act of defiance. Not just to rule, not just to shape a kingdom, but to step into myth. Nefertari, beautiful one who Kamenever truly left. She lingers in the gaps between stone and silence, in the hunger to know her, in the refusal to let her fade. She exists not in relics but in memory, not in bones but in wonder. And what could be more eternal than that? Progress was never forced, here it flowed. The people didn't measure progress in blueprints or engineering manuals, but in generations. Children learned not by reading, but by watching the hands of their elders. Elders listened to the wind, observed the rain, studied the mountain's moods, and in time, the mountain did not surrender. It simply began to trust. What rose from this dialogue is breathtaking, an impossible landscape that doesn't fight nature but dances with it. From the foot of the valley to the cloud's doorstep, these terraces ascend like a winding stairway to heaven. Their curves match the mountains so gracefully, it seems as if the land had carved itself into art. But it didn't. People did without concrete, machines, or maps. Just grit, wisdom, and the quiet belief that even the steepest slope could become a sanctuary for life. Today, the terraces still breathe. They are tended, repaired, and revered. No bulldozers, no shortcuts. The methods of the ancestors remain because they work, not by resisting change, but by proving that deep roots can weather any storm. If the dragon's backbone is the structure, then water is its soul. There are no noisy pumps here, no flashing controls. The entire system hums on gravity, tradition, and care. Water drips, flows, pools never wasted, never rushed. It travels from mountain springs and rain-fed ditches, trickling through earth-cut channels and into each terrace below. One field gently spills into the next, guided only by centuries-old wooden gates, hand-set stones, and the quiet mastery of the farmers who walk the narrow ridges each day. This isn't Farmingit's symphony. One misstep, and the rhythm falters. If one level floods, another could drown. If one leaks, the next dries up. Balance is everything. The farmers don't just manage water, they listen to it. And in spring, those flooded fields become mirrors. The sky reflects on water-stilled surfaces. Clouds drift across rice paddies. On clear nights, Stars shimmer across the terraces like dreams laid flat on earth. Come summer, those mirrors turn green thick with stalks that rustle like a sea of emerald. Autumn washes the hills in gold. Winter hushes everything with frost. The water rests, but the veins remain, waiting. Time here doesn't tick. It drips. It grows. It seeps into the soil and rises with the rice. It begins again not with alarm clocks, but with melting snow, croaking frogs, and the scent of turned earth. The rhythm isn't ours. It's seasons. It's drops. This dragon doesn't breathe fire. It breathes water pulse by pulse, through a living masterpiece of patience. Spring returns, not with blossoms but with water. As the snow melts up high, it slips down into waiting paddies, gleaming like wet jade. The dragon stirs, and the people begin. There are no trumpets, just bodies moving with purpose, generations rising with the mist, feet bare, hats low, baskets balanced, the soil heavy with memory. Each rice seedling, raised in nursery beds, is carried and planted by hand, one by one, line after line, mud-slick toes, cold knees, gentle hands. This is a sacred rhythm. Bend, reach, plant, repeat. Children trail behind, playing, learning, imitating, not with books, with feet in the water, with hands in the mud. Here, tradition is felt, not taught. Planting is not just work, it's ritual, offerings to mountain spirits, songs to guide the planting, elders scattering the first seedlings like blessings. Every step is a vow to the land, to the past, to the generations yet to come. No one rushes. You do not rush a mountain. This is meditation. This is prayer. This is humanity in sync with nature. And soon, tiny green shoots rise from the water, hope breaking the surface. Each seed is a whisper, each row a quiet defiance against hunger. And so the cycle begins again, not with thunder, but with hands, heart, and heaven. The dragon wakes. Scattered along these winding ridges are the villages that give the mountain its voice, places like Ping'an, Dajai, and Jinjiang. They don't cling to the mountain, they belong to it. Homes rise on stilts, crafted of timber, their roofs slope to match the terraced waves. From above, they look like lanterns drifting atop a green sea. Inside, life is shared fires, burn low, rice wine steams, bamboo smoke drifts through open windows. The people here, Shuang, Yao, and others are not relics. They are living heritage. They keep their own languages, their own myths, their own music. You'll know the Red Yao women by their hair long, black, and never cut since childhood, coiled high on their heads or left to tumble like silk into river water. It's not vanity, it's identity. Even with modern roads and phone signals creeping up the slopes, tradition holds. Clothes still dyed with indigo, wooden looms still creaking in shaded rooms, music still played on reed flutes and bronze drums. Weddings still danced, harvests still sung. Hospitality is instinct, not business. Visitors are welcomed with tea from mountain leaves, wine in hollow gourds, and stories older than electricity. They speak of dragons in the mist, of ancestors who carved the terraces stone by stone, of spirits who still sleep in the fields. Tourists come, cameras click, but the rhythm here remains. The rice grows, the stories pass, the terraces endure, not by staying frozen in time, but by flowing with it slowly, gently, like water slipping to the next level. Here, in the dragon's coils, life is not about speed. It's about memory. To walk the terraces of Longji is to walk through myth. These aren't just hills, they are stories made solid. They are legends you can stand on. And at the heart of it all lies the old tale. A dragon, coiled in sleep beneath the mountain, its spine stretched across the ridges. Still, watching, breathing. Locals say the mountain breathes. They don't mean it metaphorically. They believe each curve that winds through the hills is not merely a feat of engineering, but a ripple in the dragon's ancient hide. The mist that drapes the paddies each morning, that's its breath, slow and sacred. One legend tells of a famine long ago. The villagers, desperate and starving, climbed the slopes and cried out to the heavens. Their devotion moved the gods, who responded with rained a command. Carve the hills into steps and life will return. As they obeyed, a dragon emerged to guide them, its sinuous body curling into the mountainside. Ever since, the people of Longji have lived with reverence. No shouting in the fields, no felling trees without whispered prayer. These beliefs aren't written in any manual. They live in music and mist, in soft chants over water, in silence at dawn. Children grow up with these stories, not as fantasy but as truth imprinted into the ground they walk on. Mock the dragon? Expect a bad harvest. Disrespect the spirits? Invite the flood. Even now, before the first water of spring is released into the fields, some farmers bow their heads, a splash of rice wine, a whispered blessing nod for spectacle, but for balance. These are not rituals for tourists. They're as essential as sunlight. And whether you believe in dragons or not, something hangs in the air sacred and still. Maybe it's the hush. Maybe it's the clouds curling at your feet. Maybe it's the sense that this place isn't just soil and seed, but story, living and breathing. For centuries, the dragon's spine remained hidden, its rhythm known only to those who lived by it. But no sacred place stays secret forever. Roads came, then wires, then tourists camera-laden and wide-eyed climbing, where only farmers once walked. And then came the question no mountain had ever asked itself before. How do you survive the modern world? At first, fear. That concrete would smother the soil. That tradition would turn to performance. That the dragon would be domesticated, turned into postcards and plastic souvenirs. But Longji didn't surrender. It adapted, not by erasing its past, but by braiding the present into it thread by patient thread. Villagers opened homes, not as hotels, but as homes. Guests now sleep on creaking floorboards in stilt houses. They wake to roosters, eat sticky rice cooked in bamboo, drink wild mountain tea. Nothing is staged. Everything is real. The fields are still flooded each spring. Hands still plant each stalk. Sickles, worn down by generations, still reap the harvest. Children now go to school in the morning and walk the fields in the evening. One foot in the future, one planted in tradition. Tourism feeds the pocket. Rice still feeds the soul. And while some youth leave, many return, drawn back not just by family, but by something older, the whisper of water over stone, the shimmer of stars in a paddy mirror, the slow patience of the mountain. Yes, there are microphones at festivals now. Bilingual signs mark sacred springs, but beneath that veneer, the rhythm holds. Offerings are still made, elders still sing, and the dragon? Still sleeping, still listening. Longji didn't fight change. It absorbed it with grace. The terraces endure because they were never frozen. They bend, they sway, they adjust, never breaking. In a world obsessed with progress at the speed of light, this mountain proves that wisdom can move just as far, walking instead of running. Each season, the dragon shifts again. Spring arrives with glassy water. The paddies fill like silver basins, sky reflected beneath your feet. Mist rolls low. Clouds drift below the ridge. Visitors speak of walking inside a painting. No seeds sprout yet, but beneath the surface, the mountain is waking. Then summer, when the terraces burst with green, rice grows tall, lush, waving like velvet ribbons down the slopes. The air is thick. Frogs sing. Farmers, waist-deep in mud, move with quiet precision. Their hats float like tiny ships across a jade sea. Autumn brings gold. The harvest glows in sunlight. Grains bend heavy. Drums echo through the valleys. Villages light fires. Rice is steamed. Families gather. This is no chorizo, a celebration. The dragon, now fully awake, offers its bounty. Winter hushes everything. The terraces empty. Water drains. Sometimes snow falls like ash. Sometimes frost clings like lace. No tools, no footsteps, just stillness. The dragon slumbers again. Each season tells a different poem. Spring reflects, summer grows, autumn gives, winter rests. The true wonder of Longji isn't its shape, it's its rhythm. Photographers chase that perfect shot, but the terraces don't pose. They move, they shift, they breathe. And in doing so, they teach us beauty is not a moment, it's a practice. And so, the dragon turns once more, not with roar or fury, but with water, grain, and wind. Because these aren't just fields, they're promises. Promises carved by hand, passed from generation to generation, not written on paper, but pressed into the mountainside. The dragon's backbone isn't just an agricultural marvel. It's a lesson in what's possible when humans don't conquer land but partner with it. There were easier places to live, easier soil to till. But the ancestors of Longji looked up at the mountain and chose to stay. They learned its curve. They walked its lines. They asked, what if? And they answered with patience. Each bend in the terrace is more than a curve, it's a reminder. That harmony can't be rushed. That legacy must be earned. That real knowledge lives in fingers, not in manuals. These fields were not built quickly, not in years, not in decades. They took centuries. There is no shortcut to wisdom, no machine that can sculpt with reverence, only hands, callosed, careful, consistent. And yet, these terraces are not relics. They are alive. They adapt. They flex with wind, with rain, with time. That is their secret. They were never rigid. They were always fluid. Even now, as the digital world climbs the mountain's edges, the terraces remain. Because their roots, they're not just in the soil. They are in story, in ritual, in the sacred act of placing a seed in earth and believing the sky will answer. To walk along the dragon's back is to witness a pact between humans and land, a promise signed in sweat and sunlight, renewed with each planting. Proof that greatness does not always thunder. Sometimes it whispers, like water over stone. Maybe that's why these terraces speak so deeply to those who walk them, from farmers planting grain to dreamers chasing peace, because they hold a truth we've nearly forgotten. That the strongest things on earth aren't forced into being. They are grown with rhythm, patience, and respect. The dragon sleeps, the people endure, and the mountain remembers. But now, we shift our gaze from the green breath of the mountains to the golden dust of ancient Egypt, where history speaks in stone and sometimes whispers from underwater. Most who visit the Giza Plateau come to look up. They marvel at the sheer ambition of the pyramids, the still stare of the Great Sphinx, but they rarely ask, what lies beneath? Beneath the sand, beneath the river, beneath the very bones of Egypt itself. Near the quiet village of Abu Ruwash, just a breath from Giza's well-worn paths, there are rumors. Local fishermen whisper of something submerged, not mythstone. A shape, feline and deliberate, rising from silt and shadow when the Nile's waters retreat. It has no signs, no tour buses, just mud, reeds, and silence. Some call it the Other Sphinx. For decades, nothing official marked it. But sonar scans and curious explorers began revealing strange patterns too. Smooth, too symmetrical, too suspiciously intentional. They suggest a carved form. Wide shoulders, curved paws, even faint impressions of a worn face. And here's the catch: it might predate the pyramids by thousands of years. If true, this hidden monument wouldn't just reshape Egyptian history, it would unravel it. The Great Sphinx is said to be from 2500 BCE, carved during the reign of Khafre. But this figure? If it was crafted before the desert even was desert back when the Sahara was green and rivers ran wild, it means Egypt's story didn't begin with the pharaohs. It began in a forgotten world, swallowed by flood. Skeptics chalk it up to imagination. Limestone wears strangely underwater, they argue. Nature carves illusions all the time. But the curves, the patterns, the placement, they don't sit easy. Especially for those who've stood at the site and felt the charge beneath their boots, as though the ground remembers. In the 1980s, curiosity became conspiracy. Divers and amateur historians published photos, scanned the riverbed, and made wild claims. Among them, a figure deep beneath the silt, weathered beyond recognition but unmistakably shaped. Geometry, symmetry, foundation. Traditional Egyptology bristled. The academic world runs on dates, carbon tests, stratified digs. And this was all smoke. No peer review, No government dig, just blurry images and bold theories. Yet the photos kept coming. Sonar pings continued to echo strange readings, flat lines, square foundations, unnatural alignments. Then came the writers, the filmmakers, the fringe theorists. Was this a relic of a pre-dynastic culture? Was it built by survivors of Atlantis? Had Egypt buried its true past under silt and silence? The debate ignited, but the sand stayed still. No excavation, no announcement. The Sphinx, if that's what it is, remained buried, caught between skepticism and something much more tantalizing, possibility. What if Egypt's past began long before hieroglyphs, before kings and gods? Some argue the shape echoes the Sphinx at Gizanot in style, but in age. And that idea gained serious weight in the 1990s, when a geologist named Dr. Robert Schoch studied the weathering on the actual Sphinx. His findings? The erosion on its enclosure walls wasn't caused by wind, but by rain-heavy, sustained rain Egypt hasn't seen since 7000 BCE. That single suggestion cracked the timeline open. If water aged the original Sphinx, what else did it erase? Satellite imagery near Abu Ruwash showed faint outlines, rectangular foundations, deliberate stone shaping. The underwater site sits lower than the Giza Plateau, closer to ancient floodplains. Could this monument have been built when the Nile was still untamed, when the Sahara still bloomed? This theory gained fuel from what's missing in Egypt's records. Between the last ice age and the first pharaohs lies a Gapa thousand-year silence. What if the story of Egypt didn't start at the top of a pyramid but was washed away at its feet? To traditional scholars, the idea is implausible. Hunter-gatherers with no writing, no metal tools, carving a lion-bodied monument? It seems impossible until you remember Göbekli Tepe, a site in Turkey built 12,000 years ago by Stone Age people. Massive carved pillars, mythical beasts, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids. If that could exist, why not this? If the underwater Sphinx is real, it's not just a statue, it's a doorway, one that leads not into tombs, but into time, deep time, time when our ancestors knew the stars, but left no scrolls. When they built not for tourists, but for the sky. And there's the stone again. Stone doesn't forget. It remembers every chisel, every storm. Around Abu Ruwash, the grooves don't run wild. They follow the shape. The water doesn't wear it down randomly. It flows with it. This suggests intention sculpture, not chance. Some sediments here date back to the early Holocene, when the Nile was wild, green, and flooding often. If a monument was carved then, it could have stood for centuries before a shift climate, flood, or fate buried it in mud and memory. Still, many call it coincidence, hopeful shapes imagined into stone. But water doesn't mimic pause. Erosion doesn't build symmetry. Nature doesn't accidentally echo one of the most iconic sculptures just a few miles upriver. So why hasn't anyone dug? Why does this monument remain hidden, half buried, half believed? Why do governments pass over it? Why does the official record pretend it isn't there? Maybe because the questions it raises are too big. Maybe because unearthing it would mean unlearning everything. For now, it sleeps, not forgotten, just unspoken. But if that stone lion could open its mouth, what would it say? And why, in all our rush to uncover history, are we so afraid of what it might reveal? Beneath the surface of Egypt's storied sands, where myths are carved in stone, and the Nile hums secrets to those who listen, a mystery stirs untouched, unclaimed, and unconfirmed. Near the ancient village of Abura, just a whisper from the famed Giza Plateau, something waits beneath water and time. Local fishers speak of it in hushed Tonesa stone form, lion-shaped, half-buried under sediment and memory. Not part of the tourist map, nor on any guided tour, this supposed underwater Sphinx has no signs, no barriers, just silence and reeds, and the hush of ancient things not ready to be found. Its back is curved, smooth where it shouldn't be, too symmetrical to dismiss. During low tide or rare droughts, it peeks from beneath the mud grooves in stone, something paw-like, weathered yet unnaturally placed. Sonar scans whisper of geometry, of unnatural order beneath the waterline, and some claim it's older than the Great Pyramids themselves. If true, it's not just a monument, it's a revelation. But nothing official moves. Egypt's archaeology authorities are famously guarded. Their rules are strict, their standards uncompromising. You don't just dig beneath the Nile. You need paperwork, permits, years of consensus. Most of all, you need the nod from those who decide which stories get told. And the underwater Sphinx? That's a story no one's ready to rewrite. Because if it is relief, this monument predates dynasties, and Scribesit would upend everything. The entire timeline of civilization shifts. Pharaohs would no longer be the dawn of Egypt, but merely its echo. That's not a minor adjustment. That's a seismic rewrite. Which is why, despite whispered reports and strange readings, no excavation begins. The river floods. The monument sleeps. And the questions get deeper. The Sphinx, after all, wasn't just a statue. It was an emblem, strength with a mind, a guardian between the worlds of gods and men. The famous one, the one we know, still stands at Giza majestic and weathered. But what if it wasn't the first? What if there was another, older, watching from below? There are no ancient blueprints for twin sphinxes, no scrolls that spell it out. But symmetry was sacred to the Egyptians. Everything came in pairs gates, lions, gods in balance. Why not two sphinxes? Some believe this hidden form could be the prototype, a test sculpture from a forgotten era. Not built for a pharaoh, but for the sky it's perhaps a lion facing east, marking the rising sun long before names were carved into cartouches. And if it is that old, it may predate writing, religion, everything we call history. Maybe it marked a flood, a star, a god now lost. Maybe it was the first, not the forgotten. As the whispers travel, the world splits. On one side, institutions, archaeologists, academics, who demand data layers, inscriptions, carbon dates. They argue for caution, for care, for patience. The past is delicate, they say. One wrong dig, one media circus, and the truth could be buried forever. But others, outsiders, mostly geologists, engineers, rogue researchers claim waiting is just another way to say no. They've seen the scans, the satellite images, the patterns too deliberate to ignore. And they ask, who benefits if we don't look? Egypt's tourism depends on its monuments being the beginning, not the middle. A new discovery could challenge that narrative. Maybe that's the real reason the Sphinx stays buried. Books, videos, and forums have turned the underwater Sphinx into legend. Not a confirmed site, but a symbol of what we might still discover, of what we might be afraid to find. It's not just a mystery of stone, it's a test. Do we only believe what's already in museums, or are we brave enough to dig deeper? Whatever the answer, the Sphinx below remains silent, but its silence says plenty. It tells of history unclaimed, questions unasked. And every year the Nile rises and falls, revealing nothing and everything all at once. History isn't finished. It's hidden. In mud, in myths, in monuments without names. So maybe we're not supposed to solve the Sphinx. Maybe we're supposed to keep searching. Because in a world that claims to know everything, sometimes the greatest wisdom lies in what we don't, and what we're still brave enough to ask.